My name is Elias Morin. I was 31 when a single email erased an office life built over years. The company sent a link. The message read downsizing. My badge stopped working the same day. Paychecks ended a few weeks later. I had roommates. Rent split 3 ways. The ceiling in my room leaked after heavy rain. My savings felt thin. I kept applying for roles in my field. Recruiters sent polite messages. Offers did not arrive. A thread on a forum offered company. I typed my truth. I wrote about an interview at a fast food place the next morning. Replies poured in. Most offered kindness. Some offered blunt judgment. A stranger wrote, "If you had saved, you would not be here." That line hurt, but it did not break me. 2 weeks later, grandfather Augustin died. He had a quiet presence at holidays. He never bragged. He signed cards with small notes in a neat hand. The funeral felt like a high room of careful ties and softer voices. Family members arrived in sharp coats. They spoke in measured compliments. Laughter rolled like a practice trick. The will reading sat like a performance. A lawyer read bequests, watches, lease help, charity donations named for social influence. My name drew a folded napkin. Laughter rose from a table of cousins. A cousin held a plain ticket and waved it like a prize. "A ticket to where?" he said. "Poorhouse." No one had to shout. The room supplied mockery in polite bursts. The lawyer cleared his throat and moved to the next name. The napkin folded into my pocket felt like a burn. The napkin had a phone number and one line in Augustin's script. "Visit the workshop, 28 Oak Lane, early shoes for dirt." The handwriting felt like a secret meant for someone willing to go. I left the house with the napkin in my pocket. I walked through a cool night while people in the room toasted. My hands smelled of grease from the kitchen shift earlier. I felt small and steady at the same time. Shame lived in a tight place behind my ribs. Determination lived beside it. A call arrived 2 days later. A woman named Sophia spoke slow and precise. She said Augustin left instructions for a person willing to come. No lawyers, no family spectacle, only the person who shows up would meet terms. She said the workshop holds an envelope marked "for the one who comes." That phrase felt like a test. I chose to drive. I left a shift early without fuss. The truck radio spoke of traffic in distant towns. I kept the napkin folded. My shoes carried dust by the time I reached the gate. The workshop smelled of oil, cedar, and old paper. A manual press sat near a bench. A ledger lay under a clamp. The envelope sat quiet like a held breath. Augustin's letter began with a plain sentence. I wanted heirs who would do the work. He explained a plan built on small factories. He preferred slow orders to flashy deals. The letter offered keys to one modest unit. Funds arrived that would cover 3 months of payroll and materials. The letter included a small rule: no title until work proves merit. I felt a shock of relief and a sharper edge of fear. The choice asked for humility. The choice asked for daily presence. The choice asked for small skills learned under fluorescent light. I accepted. The first month felt like an education in small things. A press requires attention. A press refuses careless hands. I learned how to tune a belt. I learned to balance supply orders with cash flow. I learned how to read a vendor invoice and spot a hidden fee. The ledger became a map of small decisions that mattered far more than a polished slide deck. I kept a shift at the restaurant for a few weeks. I used those hours to pay rent while the workshop asked for time to teach. My manager at the restaurant nodded when I explained. He said nothing fancy. He wished me luck. I handed in a 2-week notice and felt a quiet relief. The crew I hired came from corners of town. One man lost a factory job when his plant closed. Another once led a startup team that folded. A young woman left high school and needed steady pay. I taught all of them the same rule Augustin wrote in the margin of his ledger: respect the work. Respect the people who do it. Work humbles fast. A cousin who once waved a ticket called months later. Headlines had a different tone. The cousin's fund collapsed under a partner's fraud. A penthouse lease vanished due to a sudden bankruptcy. The cousin's voice shook on the phone. He asked for a job. He wanted a role that came with a title and a pay bump. I recalled his laughter at the will reading. I offered him the same deal written in the ledger: entry hours, training on the floor, a path to higher pay based on performance, no special favors, no old influence. He arrived in a suit the first morning and spilled coffee on his first task. He mopped. He listened. The workshop watched him learn to hold a wrench without flinch. Humility moves people in small steps. The cousin who mocked learned to ask for help. He learned to borrow a hand without shame. He learned to keep time. He learned how a machine speaks when a bolt loosens. A week later, he apologized in a sentence short and plain. The apology had no flourish. It had labor attached. Work taught me steady speech. I learned to give simple directions that people follow. I learned to set expectations with clients early. We missed a delivery once because a supplier lied about lead time. The client called upset. I wrote a clear letter and offered a partial refund and a new delivery date. The client returned to us and changed a tone of anger to ally. Slow improvements grow from small changes. A mislabeled box taught us to print clearer labels. A return part taught us to tighten tolerances. A proactive phone call saved a whole weekend of returns. Small fixes cut waste and raise trust. Pressure arrived not only from clients. The market moved like a low tide under the shop. Orders waxed and waned. A vendor promised faster shipments and delivered delays. A big client renegotiated a contract and asked for lower prices. We tightened margins until math felt sharp. The ledger showed numbers in plain columns. Profit arrived in small sums. We learned to plan around slow weeks. I learned to save. I opened an account and moved a fraction of each paycheck. The balance rose like a low wall built brick by brick. Taxes showed up and required a separate plan. I met an accountant who explained payroll schedules and tax withholdings with calm clarity. The accountant drew a chart with numbers and a timeline. No grand advice appeared, only a list of steady acts. News about the family fell into public pages and private calls. Some relatives blamed others. Anger moved like a rumor. Divorce papers arrived in a week. The cousin who held the plane ticket once faced legal suits. We offered a role on the floor and a stern expectation of work without influence. He worked. He showed up sober and on time. He learned to thread a press with hands that had not touched a wrench before. Steadiness became my measure. I set routines for the shop. Morning checklists covered safety checks and order status. Afternoon meetings lasted 15 minutes. We recorded output in small sheets pinned to a board. We celebrated a clean run and a client who paid on time. Those small rituals knit trust. One winter, a storm blocked a truck route. A supplier could not deliver raw stock. We found a local source and paid a slightly higher price to finish an urgent run. The client called and thanked us for staying calm. The client added a long-term order after that. The ledger showed more column space for a steady customer. I kept applying for roles in my old field for a while. Recruiters sent messages. They asked about gaps. I replied plain. I explained new responsibilities and a team I had built. Some recruiters asked for a resume with corporate phrases. I wrote my duties without flourish. I explained payroll, vendor relations, quality control, and client management. A few messages responded with interest. I declined most invitations. The workshop demanded a steady hand, and I owed the crew my presence. A year after the will reading, the cousin who mocked filed bankruptcy. Press pages wanted drama and names. A tabloid framed the story as moral lesson. The cousin called and asked for help for his daughter. I offered training hours for a small wage and access to a community college program for night courses. He accepted. He learned to stabilize the small life around a steady schedule and to set aside a fraction of pay for tuition. Change arrives in slow measures. Not everyone learns the same lessons. Some relatives returned to old circles with new humility. Others left for another city and vanished from our history. A few kept pride as an unfinished project. The workshop kept running. We added a second press after an order growth period. A bank offered a modest loan after reviewing our ledger and seeing months of on-time payments. The loan arrived with a checklist of covenants we could handle. We used the money to buy a small die set and improved quality. Sales rose in small percentages that made payroll easier. I often think about fear. Fear is a steady companion during a run of late invoices. I learned to name fear aloud to the crew. I said, "I feel worry about next month. I am taking action." I called a vendor. "I will review lead times." Naming a problem removes its power. The crew responded with suggestions. One worker knew a supplier who offered partial shipments and flexible terms. That lead saved us a weekend of silence. Humility and mercy define leadership in this work. A rule Augustine wrote remain my compass: offer work to those who accept responsibility. I applied the rule with the cousin who mocked and with strangers who showed up hungry for steady pay. I trained people with clear steps. I asked them to measure progress in hours and in output. No titles arrived until tasks proved done well. Teaching binds learning into memory. A new hire asked why labels mattered. I showed a stack of returned boxes with slight differences. The new hire saw the problem and suggested a change in print font. The small tweak cut returns by a clear margin. Teaching invites ownership. Outside the shop, life moved with small contests. My roommates found new jobs. One left for a remote role in a quieter town. Another stayed and enrolled in classes to become an HVAC technician. I visited a campus with the cousin who mocked. He signed up for a night course on basic accounting. The cousin kept a small notebook and wrote the same rules Augustine had written in the ledger. The notebook became his quiet map. Romance arrived slowly. A woman named Mara worked at a supplier. I met her at an old trade show before the shop needed her parts. We spoke about bolts and patience. She asked about suppliers and why we favored a small one in town. She smiled when I told a short story about a mislabeled box. We met for coffee several times between shipments. She listened while I explained ledger lines in plain sentences. She did not offer grand advice. She offered steady presence. She taught me how to cook a stew on a night when a crew needed late hours and warmth. The future never held a single plan. The shop offered a path built day by day. I formed a schedule for growth. We added one client at a time. We kept margins safe. The crew learned to rotate shifts to avoid burnout. Vacation days arrived after a discussion and a pledge to maintain quality. A storm of controversy struck us when a former client accused a worker of a mistake that would cost a shipment. The worker felt crushed. The client demanded compensation. I offered a fund from a small reserve and set a process to improve checks. The client accepted the fund and extended a chance for future orders after seeing our corrective actions. The worker regained confidence. A system formed to prevent the same error. Lessons stacked up in small ways: keep a reserve, build processes, teach clear steps, pay wages on time, respect clients and workers equally, hold people to standards with an offer to improve. A childhood memory visited often. I remember a school project where the class built a small bridge from popsicle sticks. The bridge broke during testing when a weight tipped it off balance. The teacher asked the class to rebuild with a focus on structure and balance. The lesson held. Stability comes from sound work. I traced that memory into the shop and taught similar care to my crew. The workshop became a place where pride and humility met. People who once sneered now learned to fit apart with quiet pride. A man who had a record of poor choices asked for a second chance and proved reliable. I hired him and watched weeks pass until his attendance and focus became commonplace. The crew settled into a rhythm that made payroll look safe. A check arrived one month with a note from a client: "Thank you for honesty and for swift correction." That note rested on the ledger like a small sun. I kept the note in a drawer and read it on nights when invoices lagged. The drawer held small tokens of work: a shipping label, a repair receipt, a thank you note. Each object reduced the sting of past shame. I learned to measure success differently. Success did not mean a mansion or a fleet. Success meant a steady payroll and a team who could plan for a child and book a dentist appointment and take a day off without fear. Success meant a cousin who once mocked describing his night class with pride. Success meant a young hire who told me she wanted to own a home by 35. The promise in the napkin had more parts than I first saw. Augustin knew how the world policed status. He wanted heirs who resisted the spectacle. He left a measured plan with tools to train a person in values and in craft. The envelope had a ledger for a reason. Numbers reveal truth when language hides. A neighbor asked once how I felt about returning to corporate life. I answered plain. I learned useful things from both worlds. From the office came a habit of planning and a language of forecasts. From the shop came skill with hands and a habit of steady speech. Each side taught tools the other missed. I kept an open line with contacts in both worlds. Years fold like pages. The workshop grew to 3 presses. We added a small training fund for workers who wanted night classes. The training fund supported 1 person per quarter. One trainee used the fund to enroll in an electrical course. He returned with knowledge that saved a machine in a night emergency. The return on that fund arrived in a single repaired line. We kept rules on mercy. A worker who broke a tool accepted a penalty in days and returned with careful work. A worker who stole faced termination after a neutral process. Mercy included clear consequences. Mercy did not mean allowing negligence. My savings moved from a small wall to a more solid base. I bought a late model van for deliveries with a loan structured in clear payments. The van earned its keep in deliveries and gave me an asset for the business. I met a bank officer who explained credit in plain steps and showed a template for a projected cash flow. We filled that template and made choices based on numbers rather than hope. Family relationships shifted tone. A cousin who once scorned offered help with a client connection. He wanted to repair old damage. His effort felt small and honest. He sent an introduction that led to a modest but steady contract. He received a clear rule: bring value, not pressure. He delivered. I taught the crew to hold a final checklist for shipments. The checklist saved us mystery errors. The crew learned to test parts under pressure before packing. That practice reduced returns and improved client trust. A young worker spoke in a quiet voice on a winter morning. He said he wanted to open a small repair shop in his neighborhood. He asked what steps to take. I offered 5 items. Learn core skills, save for a small reserve, find a steady supplier, secure a space with fair rent, and build a client list with honesty. He nodded and sketched a plan on a scrap. The scrap later became a notebook with a cover worn at the edges. He wrote steady plans in that book and returned months later with a small lease and a first client. Lessons multiply when shared. The training fund helped more people than money alone. The fund created a habit of learning in the shop. The shop became a place where a life could stretch a little wider. I write these lines with a ledger open. A new order sits in the queue. My hands know a press by muscle memory. My voice gives orders in clear sentences. Pride lives in the work and in the choices to offer mercy and demand effort. The final truth Augustin wrote remained clear. Real wealth grows from the courage to do work when no one watches. Those words guided hearing, training, and mercy. Those words remain a touchstone when headlines roar and when invoices delay. If you lose a job, take practical steps. Save a small share of each paycheck when possible. Treat humble work as training for wider things. Learn skills that translate into responsibilities. Offer mercy to those who accept responsibility and hold firm to standards. Build routines. Keep a simple ledger of income and expenses. Teach others what you learn. Those acts build a life that resists sudden storms. The napkin started as a mockery in a wealthy room. The napkin led me to a workshop and a plan that asked for hands and steady speech. The plan formed a team. The team made steady clients. The clients paid wages. The wages bought small safety and a growing reserve. The reserve offered options and time to plan. I do not romanticize the hardship. Nights on a couch felt bleak. Shame returned in hollow hours. The path required stubborn daily acts. Rewards arrived slowly. Work demanded presence. I gave presence and received trust. My life did not return to the old office. My life built a different shape. The shop offered steady meaning and a team that learned to solve problems. The cousin who mocked became a worker who cleaned and learned. Some relatives changed course. Others left old habits untouched. This story ends with a small truth. Choices made in moments of shame shape futures. A napkin and a number led me to a workshop. A workshop asked for hands and honesty. Hands and honesty built a team and a steady ledger. The ledger bought payroll and a small reserve. The reserve bought time to plan. My grandfather's final note sat in a drawer for years. I opened the drawer on hard nights. I read the sentence in his neat hand. Real wealth grows from the courage to do work when no one watches. Those words kept me steady and gave shape to a life rebuilt from small acts. The promise held firm. The napkin earned meaning. The workshop held truth. If you stand at a similar crossroads, choose to show up. Bring shoes that can get dirty. Learn the ledger. Teach someone else the small steps you learned. Build a routine. Save a small sum. Offer work to people who accept responsibility. Demand effort and offer mercy in the same breath. This is the promise I found in a fold of paper and a plain letter. I kept that promise with both hands. The work kept me honest. The work kept my crew fed. The work gave a cousin a grounding he lacked before. The work gave my life a shape I respect.